Hi, Justina. Thanks so much for joining us today.
All right. And it looks like we are live. Got Facebook up and streaming as well. So we've got that going.
Morning to a couple of our new arrivals. Please, we're about a minute from starting out, so please jump in that chat box and tell us where you're joining us from.
All right, I have got 12:15, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We may have more join us in the next minute or two, but I just want to say thank you for joining us today and welcome to our webinar. And if you're joining us on Facebook, welcome. We're so happy to have you join us today. So my name is Stephanie McLaughlin, and I am the Training and Evaluation Specialist with Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers, or PTIs. Our PTIs are funded through the Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs. The 4 PTI projects in Texas are known as PACT, PACT, and TEAM. Our mission at Partners Resource Network is to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. And also joining us today from Partners Resource Network is our Director of Statewide Services, Christina Henning, our Support Specialist, Chelsea Rivas, and our Technology Specialist, Zach Hildago. If you're having any technical difficulties, please reach out to Zach in the chat box and he can assist you with those. And for those of you that are needing a certificate of attendance, you will be receiving an email to thank you for attending today's webinar. If you'll follow the link in that email, you can get your certificate of attendance. At the end of the webinar, we will have a time for question and answers. So if you're joining us on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A box so we don't miss those. And if you're joining us on Facebook, you can put those in the comments and we'll be sure and catch those. We are recording today's webinar, and the recording will be available on our website at prntexas.org and also on our Facebook page. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our speaker and give her as much time as possible to share. So our speaker today is Mary Baker-Boudissa. She is a field associate and provides subject matter expertise in educational equity, culturally responsive practices, and diversity and equality in the workplace. She is a professional learning specialist with experience in designing online courses, developing highly engaging content, and effective delivery of learning sessions to support anti-bias education, curriculum implementation, and strategies for building cultural competence among educators. She has supported district and state clients across the U.S. with professional services that include equity audits, curriculum and special education reviews, stakeholder engagement, and professional development. These projects provide districts with practical recommendations for improving student outcomes, applying equitable practices across departments and buildings, partnering with families, and increasing access to academic and social emotional support for all students. Mary's work also includes conducting assessments and research on Indiana charter schools as the former assistant director of charter school research at Ball State University. She is a certified co-active coach with additional expertise in trauma-informed care, having spent the last 10 years working as an advocate for survivors of human sex trafficking. Mary has her Master's of Arts in Educational Psychology from Ball State University and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Harvard University. Mary, welcome back. It is so wonderful to have you join us again. And I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, I think that you might have to enable screen sharing for me, but I'm really, really excited to be here. One of the things that I forgot to add to my bio is that, my first love is working with paraprofessionals and educators who work with students with identified disabilities. In the state of Indiana, we had a resource center where we worked with teachers of those students with the most significant intellectual disabilities. But I'm also a parent of a child with a mental health disability. And so I am really excited to be with you. This is work that's important and that I'm passionate about. But really, I'm just so excited because I get to talk to parents. So today, I just want to talk a little bit about strengthening that partnership between home and school using effective communication strategies. And essentially, this is a session for you to ask any questions that you have. But really, my goal is always to resource how parents and families can access their child's school and work more effectively with teachers and everyone in the school partnership. Sometimes there are barriers that exist, and I think it may be some preconceived notions about what we think that parents should be doing and what teachers should be doing. And what can happen is it can keep us from doing what we really want to do, which is to support our children at achieving the best possible outcomes and seeing their potential. So today is really about celebrating you and the role that you play in fostering that connection, but also really fostering learning and fostering development and growth for your children. And that looks different for every child. And it looks different for every parent, whatever you want to do to engage and what resources you have available. But it's always an added benefit to children when there's involvement from parents and families. So the objectives for today, as I said, just to kind of learn about strengthening that connection, really learning what makes the strong foundation and thinking about the ways that we can initiate partnership, right? Because every new year, we may have a new set of teachers, we may have a new set of administrators, and especially in today's world where there's often staffing shortages and changes. So it's thinking about how we can initiate that, thinking about strategies and tools for our communication and what that might look like, and planning for how we can communicate. And then also understanding that there will be challenges in those relationships and thinking about strategies for bridging communication as we move into different transitions with our children. So for this first part, I would love for you to just kind of reflect as you start a new year, or as you go into studying with teachers, or even if you've worked with a teacher or an educator for a long time. What's one thing that you wish that your child's teacher knew or understood about your child? And then I want you to consider what's one thing that you wish your child's teacher knew or understood about you. And I invite you, as you're sharing that, to put that in the chat. I'm going to try to have my chat up as well so that I can see what's being shared there. And I will try to make sure that it doesn't block out any part of the presentation, as can sometimes happen. But would love to hear from you about the things that that you wish that teachers knew about you and about your child. Oh, my kid isn't trying to be bad. He actually wants to do well. Yes. Thank you so much for that. It's true. Anything else that you want to share? I know for me, it was, hoping and wishing that teachers understood that I am really trying to do the best that I can, but that I'm navigating a lot of this, brand new, and that sometimes that's very challenging. So, right, aren't all bad. Parents are trying. I wish they knew behavior was a form of communication. Absolutely. That your child needs to feel safe and comfortable before I'll work with them. Absolutely. Right. Right. These are things that it's interesting because we know them in our friendships and relationships, right? People want to know that we care, and we try to assume that our friends and our family have good intentions. When it comes to that school, home partnership, there's often this divide where that's not the assumption that is made. And so it's really important for these things to be shared. Hope they understand that he is trying his best to work through his challenges and make the environment comfortable. Absolutely. Some of the behaviors that people will observe is they're thinking, oh, this must be a child trying to be a distraction. And I'm like, no, it's about trying to concentrate, about trying to manage one thing when there are a lot of other things that are also people are expecting you to manage. And so I really appreciate all of these comments. Thank you so much. So when we talk about building a foundation for the really effective way of communicating and having that partnership, I like to think of the gradual release module, and in special education, we talk about it a lot, but it is good teaching, right? It's the I do, we do, and you do. I demonstrate something, and I try to make sure that as I'm demonstrating this, that then we have the opportunity to try something together. And then I invite you to try it on your own. Well, I think that what's important in the school environment is that all of the strategies that we have for good teaching are also ways to think about relationships and the larger learning community. And I think of it as, we know that there are things that the teacher is modeling at school. She's using the I do mode. And as parents, we are also doing that. We're saying, here's something that I do. We say to our children, this is a skill we want you to demonstrate, right? This is something that we want to see. And then we try it together. I mean, how many times have we, even in helping our children to learn to tie their shoe or to zip something, it's that process of, yes, I've done it for you for a long time. And then we try it together. And then I want to empower you to do it. It's very similar. And we all, as advocates for our children and as the educators who are working with our children, need to be considering that we are trying our best to do these things. And the best partnership at home looks like I'm doing at school, I'm doing at home, and then we're also bringing this together and using a similar strategy because we want to see our children grow into independence. And so I appreciate so much that, good teaching is often what we need to share with parents, the strategies that really help us to help children develop independence and to build on their skills. So what the teacher does in the classroom is supported by what I do as a parent or as a family member at home, and vice versa. And what we do together actually has an impact on what our children will then be able to say, I can do now. So I just love thinking through things as a model of this is good teaching, but this is also a good practice to think about. And sometimes as you're going into conversations with teachers, often mentioning things that about as teaching strategies and saying that this is comparable to what I try to do at home. Can you help me to think about that in other areas that my child is working on? because that can be relatable to teachers, and it gives them a little, like the first kind of plank in a bridge to start building understanding between home and school. So one of the things I want to emphasize is just the 3 C's of partnership, right? You see communication, consistency, and collaboration. Well, communication always has to be at least a 2-way street, right? And it has to remain open. Think of it like that passageway that is when it's one way, you can only go through this way. And if it's closed off to other people, there's a block at the other end for them to be able to get through. When we have an exchange of information, then we are so much more effective at being able to best support our children in their endeavors, and also to really head off some of the things that can come up, misunderstandings, miscommunication, and even concerns that grow and develop. So that 2-way communication is critical. And I know that as parents and families, we enter in wanting to have communication, and sometimes in the school community, teachers just aren't sure how to affect that. But we can be a part of facilitating that and making sure that it continues to remain open. When it comes to consistency, consistency is so critical for the opportunities for our children as students, as learners, to be able to practice what they're learning. If I know what's happening at school, whether it's a coping strategy, or it's a soothing technique, or it's something that helps to de-escalate behavior, and as a parent, I can apply that at home, then I can also practice. Again, the I do, we do, you do. If I'm using that same strategy at home, then it's consistent. But I don't know if we don't communicate. I don't know if you're trying something new and that hasn't been shared with me as a parent. So I think the partnership really has to be the important piece. I always try to go to my children's teachers saying, I'm a partner in this, and I want to reinforce what is necessary and what is really supportive for my child. And I ask that you communicate with me so that I can reinforce. And ultimately, collaboration, because we don't get anywhere if we can't do this together. And when there are challenges, the expectation is, teachers in the school is the expert. But guess what? Parents have expertise too. We know our children, we spend time with them in contexts that are outside of school. So having a holistic picture of who our children are is really helpful, and allowing us to collaborate. I'll bring what I know and what my experiences are. You bring what you know and what your experiences are. And then as we see a challenge, let's work together with what we know to solve that together. So a lot of this, I think I'm probably preaching to the choir. There are probably, 100 times when you said this or tried to convey this to teachers or to staff at the school, and maybe sometimes you've experienced some resistance in that, right? But there are some things that you can do to set the stage. This doesn't mean that there won't be bumps that will arise, but recognizing that starting early with communication, communicating when there's not an issue, when it's just an introduction to say, hello, here's who I am, communicating, talking about the best ways to stay in contact. For example, I work from home, but working a full day, it's not that I'm always near my phone to answer calls. So making sure that the teacher, the educator, the school understands that my not being available is not an indication of not being interested, but here's the best way to get to me right away. In terms of consistency, just always being willing to be supportive, and making time to ask your child about school or work, and however they articulate that back to you, if they're communicating by maybe drawing a picture, or if you have a particular signal that you use to say, this was a day that I really had fun, or this was a day when things were just okay. And then asking for resources, things that if there's something that you don't feel comfortable reteaching, or if there's a skill or a strategy that you really want more insight about, ask questions. And I would say ask questions is number one. Just because when you ask a question, it says to the teacher, I recognize that you know how to teach and how to develop this in my child, and I'm asking questions because I want to be supportive and I want it to be consistent. And in terms of collaboration, I think just always discussing those goals and expectations. And if you have a question about a goal or an expectation, ask. If the goal that you have from year to year looks differently than what you thought it would look like, then ask and explain why. Give context for that. But also being open to strategies and ideas, because if there's one thing that I think is consistent in the world, it's change. And so every time that a new group of teachers comes out of school and training, then they're learning new strategies, new ideas, new pieces of information that they want to apply. And there's so much information on the internet that we also have access to new strategies and new ideas. So asking questions and saying, is this something that you're familiar with? Do you know about this? And is this something that is appropriate for my child in school? Is this something that's applied, or can you help me understand why this isn't something that I'm seeing? Because this isn't about questioning expertise. It's about collaborating, and it's about trying to bring information into the space that is the best possible resource for our children. So when I think about initiating a positive partnership, I think just back to that first question that I asked about things you wish that your teacher knew about you, things that you wish the teacher knew about your child. Some things are hard to share, and they're things that we would typically share, in person. Like we're going through a separation right now, and that has created some stress and maybe a little bit of emotional discourse for my child at home. But I wanted you to be aware of that. So maybe just a short note to the teacher, or asking, do you have 5 minutes for a phone call so that I can share something with you? It's up to you and how you feel comfortable sharing that. But I think making sure that the things that you wish that they knew are the things that you make a point of saying, because assumption is really easy. Our brains are wired to fill in information where there isn't any. But information that you give then can replace any assumptions, and helping them to understand. One of the things that has been a negative experience is that people have always assumed that my child is bad, that I've even heard that used in terms of labeling. Even talking about the language that people have used in the past that is really, upsetting. Terms that they might find in your child's IEP or in a behavioral plan that have been disconcerting, that you feel like are unfair, and saying, I'd really like for us to work together to find a way to think differently about that. Describing behavior is one thing, but describing a child as bad or defiant or uncoachable or resistant to everything, right? There are some phrases that teachers still use that are unfair and are not helpful in seeing children grow and develop and reach their potential. So any information that will support social and emotional needs. So be proactive in that communication, share. Maybe you'll share more than the teacher will need, but it's from the heart and it's important. And as an advocate for your child, making sure that you share the things that are necessary and important to you are also things that could be important to your child. So knowing what celebrations are really important, what milestones recently that they've achieved, or things that they've accomplished that aren't reflected in a record. Those are things that teachers won't have access to. So saying this is something that happened over the summer, or something that happened at home, or this is a trip that we took that was really significant and important. So want to share those things, because those are also connection points for teachers to students to strengthen their partnerships and connections in school. So, and what are your hopes for your child for the year? What goals do you have or have you and your child talked about that are not part of an IEP? that those are important too, and things that can be in those strategies that teachers are modeling around academic goals or even social goals, that there are other things that can be incorporated. I know your mother told me you're working on this, or your grandmother said you're working on this, and we're going to support that in the classroom, because again, that's partnership. I think about in the early days, the win, and this is not true for the entire year, but a lot of times that first period when you're going to an open house or when you're contacting a teacher before the first day of school, that you want to be intentional about the things that you're sharing, because you may only have 5 minutes, you may only have 10 minutes or 15 minutes with the teacher. And if you'll notice, when you go to open house, there are times when teachers aren't writing anything down because they're greeting everybody, they're moving from parent to parent. It doesn't mean that information isn't important, but what you can say at that open house is, I'm really looking forward to talking with you and sharing some things. And I know that, maybe we don't have space for that this evening, but would love to have just a few minutes of your time during this week. If you could just shoot me a note, let me know when it's convenient. I even say reaching out before the first day of school, just to say, hello. Their emails are usually on the website, and maybe it's a teacher you've had before, just offering that, hello, I'm looking forward to the start of a great year. Just wanted to make sure you had my email, and here are any updated numbers that I have. I know they're in the record, but it's really easy if a teacher has them at their fingertips, to be able to reach out and talk with you. And I think in terms of just being a presence, an in-person meeting, if you can make that happen at least once, schedules are busy, but if you have at least one chance for them to put a name with a face, just a handshake or a hello, even, stopping by with your child at that open house or whatever that event is, so that the teacher makes the connection with the two of you, it just really softens the relationship and the interaction going forward. And please, if at any time you have questions or you'd like to add something to the chat, please feel free. This is meant to be a time for you to drop in those questions and comment on anything that you'd like. The Q&A I may not see, and so Stephanie, feel free to give me a heads up if there's something that comes in there, and just let me know. So when you, again, thinking back to the start of the session and those things that you wish your child knew, and the best way to discover information about people is to ask them or have them disclose it to us. And so when you're thinking about just writing that first note, it may be just a few sentences. And these are just some ideas about things that you could drop in a quick note or an email. The best way to reach me is always this: the best days that I can come to school if something happens, or on these days, here's another person that you can contact, and that would be great. And then I like to say, when, so like, for example, when I have 3 children, but when one of them is having a difficult day at school, I would love it if they had the chance to just call me, or if you wouldn't mind if they just sent me a text, because usually I can send something back that's encouraging, right? And helps them to kind of get through that next milestone. Or I would appreciate it if, when they ask for 5 minutes in the bathroom just to go and, regroup, if you would honor that. Or if they have something going on at home, I'll give you a heads up, right? I will plan to give you a call, or I'll send you a note in the morning to let you know how things are going. And I think that that's really the important communication. It's clear, it's succinct, but it's always about information that the teacher will not have, that you have, because you are the expert on those experiences outside of school. And often experiences that happen at school that they're processing when they get home. So I think, to the point of something that someone said in the chat about trust and being worried about sharing things with the school, I think that that's where it's important to start with some simple things about, here's how to reach me. I really want to help, and these are some of the areas that I've found are really important. When you're talking about previous experiences, I think you don't have to always mention names, right? what you can do is talk about one thing that I would love to try this year is this, or one thing that has really been tough has been this, but we'd love to move to this year. And so I think thinking solution and maybe even offering an idea or saying, I would love to hear your input and your thoughts about that, so that it's something that we could change this year to make for an experience where we can have a really good partnership. The reality is that every teacher is different. And sometimes you might have a tough experience with one teacher and then the next year move into having a much different experience. So here are some sample questions. And since you have a copy of the PowerPoint, I just wanted to make sure these are just ideas about things that you might ask, especially if you're going to a meeting. And some of what we'll talk about today is just having a strategy for going into the meeting, being mindful of the amount of time that you'll have with the teacher, and maybe picking one or two questions that you've jotted down. You could even, before a conference or a planned connection, you might send an email and say, this is what I wanted to talk about, and then try to stay focused on that one topic, because when you have time that the teacher is giving to this, sometimes it's not unlimited. They might be making other calls, and that's not an excuse, but it's also recognizing that when you honor the teacher's time and they honor yours, then that gets reciprocated over and over and over again. Because if we're adding building blocks and we're putting pieces into that bridge, then a part of that is just recognizing, hey, I know that your time is short. This was the thing that was most pressing. I do have some other things and would love to talk to you another time. I know that maybe we would need to schedule a longer conversation for that. And if that's okay, please let me know some available times that just to do that. So, and that goes to part of what we need to do, which is to plan, right? So everybody needs to have context when we make decisions, when we implement a process. And I think, since our children make our lives very full, they also keep us very busy. We have a right to say that there are times when we're not going to be available. And so being the best communicator about what our needs are and about the things that the realities of what we're facing and what we're dealing with. So when it's, a certain season, if you have children that are involved in sports or you have children that are involved in extracurriculars, you may be running around from place to place, and afternoons may be very difficult or early mornings may be the best. That's information that you can communicate. And so think about the kind of information that you want to share. So for example, consider the context that you could provide to teachers in terms of your availability. Here's my work schedule, or if it varies, saying it varies. So while I might be able to come in on a Tuesday one week, the next week is different. And thinking about the method of contact. If you can identify one surefire way to get me, right? What surefire way to get to me, surefire way to contact myself or another caregiver or my partner or someone else in the family. That's the piece of information that is really most helpful for a teacher to have at their fingertips. When you're talking about goals, maybe it's just sharing some recent milestones and saying, these are not in the IEP, or these are the ones that as part of the IEP, we really wanted to emphasize because the next part of that is this. And here are some things we're working on at home. Maybe one or two things that your child is learning or is really struggling with. And that's okay to mention because the teacher may see some of those things in social times or in other experiences during the school day, and can also reinforce and support what you're doing. Concerns, especially if there's a particularly challenging area, or if there's something that is triggering, something that relates to even a traumatic experience that isn't noted in student records, or something that is a fear that may have been unlocked. I think about summers where I would stay home and I would watch movies, with like all of our siblings, and sometimes we'd see something really scary. And the new thing was that I would be afraid of that, deathly afraid of it. And so I think understanding that everything changes. And so as those things arise, then making sure that you share that. In terms of homework, I always say share where they need support, but also share where you may need support. I like math, but I would say I don't understand at all the methods for teaching math now. And it's not the way we learned it. We memorized everything and we just knew stuff. But now there are some different ways of teaching math and engaging students in their academic learning. So being honest about that, I could really use some more resources around how you can practice fractions at home, or if it's just number facts, or if it's writing an equation, what are some of the strategies that you have that can help? And then I think always, who are the people that are the key relationships? Because that may also be something that isn't in the student information. And so sharing that in a way that helps the teacher to understand, who the key people are, who those folks are that your child may mention or draw or communicate about, or have learned something from, that is really important. So getting to know your students is a teacher's job. Getting to know them, getting to understand them, because in order to unlock learning, you really need to know them. And who knows them better than the people in their support system, who are their caregivers and their family. So along with thinking about the context that you have, I say also consider the lens through which teachers and administrators and all of the people in the school community are looking. Again, these are not about, it's not about excuses, it's about recognizing perspective and also helping us to build those relationships. So when I think of teachers, I think of how much the expectation is for them to have instructional time. And then in some cases, they don't have a lot of prep time. So they're taking that time after school or before school. So then if you think that means that there's a limited amount of time then when they even have an option of taking a phone call or of being able to do that during the day, because someone is going to come in and observe them and someone's going to expect there to have been a certain number of instructional days, instructional hours, and milestones that they have to reach. So just being mindful of that really sets you up for a good relationship, saying, I know that your time is this, but is it possible, could we have a 5-minute phone call that you actually can keep to 5 minutes? Or if they continue talking, saying, do you have more time or do you need to go, that's helpful. And they should afford that same thing to you. It's not about, this should not be a one-way street, it should be two-way. So I think just setting that expectation, and here's the kicker. We are teaching teachers too. We are modeling for them the things that make for a good parent-family involvement relationship. And so as we do that, we're modeling the way that we would like to be treated so that it continues to keep that communication open. With administrators, it's always about the competing priorities. I've got to do a fire drill and run that today, but then I've also got a bunch of paperwork that I'm supposed to do as the administrator. And then, 5 students walk into my office that they have been sent down there by the teacher because they were arguing or they were fighting or it's over some pencil or something like that. So thinking about that when you're looking for a return phone call, understanding that your expectations are appropriate and right, you should expect to be communicated with. But I think also saying, this is something that I need to have a phone call on today, or this is something that I would like to talk to you. And if you aren't able to get to me tomorrow at the latest, that would be great. So just understanding that as they're going through those voicemails and emails, that they're triaging that as well. Bus drivers, I always say, you want to have a chat with the bus driver. They're watching the road, they're watching the students, and I wish that every bus had assistance on it, because there should be people helping to kind of manage some of the behavior. I think a lot of bullying takes place on buses, and I've expressed those concerns in my own school district about that. But safety is always going to be where they're thinking, and so when something happens on the bus and the bus driver doesn't know what it was or didn't address it right away, a lot of times it's because bandwidth, safety. So helping, to work with the school to have a solution around something or to really address a serious issue is critical. Instructional aids, just knowing that there are a lot of times when parents will show up and say, can you tell me this or can you tell me that? And as instructional aids, most states would have something governing what they can and can't do. And they're not really supposed to be sharing anything. So talking to you as the parent to give you information that is outside of their purview means that then they are going to have to be accountable to a supervising teacher and maybe put their position at risk. So, but saying to an instructional aide, would you please let the teacher know that I came and asked about this, and just leave them a note and maybe follow up? That would be great, because they can provide that. And if instructional aides are spending a lot of time with your students, feel free to always say, when I have my conference, I would love to talk to one of the aides who works with them, frequently. And I think that would be great. And yes, the slides will be sent out at the end of the presentation. They'll share. They also posted a link in the chat so that you can access these. And when it comes to related service providers, doing the professional support, providing a lot of information, but limited time with each student on their caseload, because they're usually, there might be one psychologist for all the students that need to have assessments done, and there are other people kind of doing outside assessments and things. So there might be a limited amount of time that they've had with your child. And so asking, the teacher as a person who can help to coordinate some of those conversations. If you have a particular related service provider that you've been working with for a long time, maybe a speech pathologist or someone, they might even be able to help you to coordinate and get information from each of those providers. But it's really important just to recognize that their time is limited and is spent in ways that we can't always fathom because we're not with them on a daily basis. And our children are a priority, but we want to make sure that we understand that there are a lot of children that are being served, often maybe by overworked professionals who have a heavy caseload. And recognizing that, again, is another plank in that bridge. So I think about just these quick tips of, communicating to celebrate, communicating not just when it's about a concern. Just a quick note to say, really appreciate all you're doing for, I noticed, or they came home with something that they'd made and I really was glad to have it. Clear expectations, maybe saying, I don't expect to hear an update every week, but I would love to have, to be able to talk with you more often than just the parent-teacher conference. Or I would love to have the chance to maybe just have a few minutes of a phone call to talk with you, or to be able to stop by, maybe one day after school. That's the kind of thing that, setting that up. And teachers should also be communicating that back to you about, I do updates, and I have a standard update that I use. If there's something special that you'd like to know, then that communication may not be as frequent, but I'm happy to do it. And I think any data that you collect at home, and this is one of the things I want to emphasize, because as parents, we may think we're not collecting data like teachers are collecting data, like schools collect data and assessment data. But what you observe is data. If your child is able to do something that's been set as a goal, but they're not able to do it at school, if you're observing them doing it at home, that's a data point. So being able to come to the conversation and saying, I've observed it in these circumstances at home. Do you think that we're able to replicate that in the classroom? Or is there something you'd like me to try to see if we're able to do it consistently at home as well? So bringing data. You also are the expert, at home and in those environments that teachers can't observe. Right. So it's really important for you to do that and to continue to, be respectful, to avoid blaming, because one of the scariest things I think is that parents are blaming you for things that, as an overworked educator, you may not have control over, but certainly you want accountability, but blame doesn't get us anywhere. We also, need to know that as parents and families, we're not going to accept being blamed for ... right? And so that perspective taking, that sharing information and context is really critical. And I think as you're talking to teachers and establishing this or initiating, conversation with someone new and that communication, as you plan for that, think about what some of the things you want to put on the table are. Like, I need you to have context for why I may not do this or this every week, or why it is that there may be notes that end up in the backpack that I don't see. And it's because my child, has 2 places we share custody. And so sometimes I get things out of the backpack, sometimes I don't. Or my child goes to an after school program. And so sometimes things come out of the backpack and I don't see them. So it's really important to, I think, be able to state context and to provide that. So I want to talk just a little bit about ongoing communication, because that's another area as you're planning, thinking about what are the celebrations that you want to talk about or that you want to be notified of, or things that you want to be able to share. How do you want changes in behavior communicated, and how will you communicate those? Will you wait for the the ARD meeting or the case conference, or is it something that you can establish a more regular communication to share those things? If it's urgent, then I think just saying to the teacher, when there's something that's happened, I really would like to be able to share that with you because it can significantly affect their day. How would you like for me to do that? I think it's good to have a how in mind, but also to ask to confirm that, because teachers will have their way of the thing that they go to right away and look at and check all day. And then there are other things that may not be until the evening when they have some time to sit down. And this is a good rule of thumb. The more frequent the communication, the more concise it needs to be. If you want something weekly from a teacher, it's probably going to be pretty brief for every week, because it means that they're doing it for every student every week. If you want to share something weekly, probably a good idea to keep it very focused, because that way it can be reviewed and implemented or applied or noted quickly by the teacher. And I think that just helps. And it also keeps from having to have like 10 things that you're listing that are going on, because you've had a chance to maintain regular communication. So these are just some conversation starters. Again, they're in the PowerPoint presentation for you to take a look at, but I think just initiating those calls and saying, here's who I am, and here are some things that I really need help with, especially if you're starting an email, getting to the, here's what I really need to know first, or here's what I want to share with you. And there are different purposes for that communication. Sometimes you're asking for a conference. Sometimes you're making a formal request for that. Sometimes you're just asking for a little bit of additional help or resources. And the other thing that I would add here when you're planning to reach out to the teacher is maybe a timeline. Is this something that you could put together this week? If not, let me know. Or I would like to have this before maybe the next assignment is due. Or if we're talking about different goals that you're working on, this is something that I know that we're going to be working on during the month of, is this something that you could share maybe before the start of the next month? So being proactive is really helpful in that instant, because it gives teachers some time to pull together, and related service providers to pull together what you need. This is just a tool that the format can be whatever you want, but thinking about a sheet that you share with the teacher, and maybe this is something you use on a weekly basis, and you're jotting down things throughout the week, right? Things that I know we were working on in terms of goals. And these are the areas that were really successful this week, things that we saw some progress, things that were more of a struggle. We had some success, but we were still kind of working through that. And here's how that went. And making sure that you just jot a quick note. Here's what I observed this week. Just wondered if you saw the same things. Maybe the teacher will shoot back with I saw this too during this week, or this was a date. So, proposing an idea that is organized. Hey, I want to be really effective in what I'm sharing. And I want to make sure that I don't, send you too many different documents. So is this something that would be helpful to you? And the teacher may have something that they say, well, I would really love for you to use this because this fits in with my notes or it's easy for me to scan. So being open to that. So just, a quick thought about like maybe some questions that you would want to pose to the teacher, some things that you've thought of, I really need to say this, or I really need to send something like this. What are some of the thoughts you have in terms of questions that you would want to pose? Listen, I never call on people and make them share something. So I think maybe just considering what are the questions that you, the things that you wonder about when you see a new paper come home from school, or there's something coming up that you would love for your child to be considered for or to be able to participate in. Or if it's a question about, why don't they have this at the school? Maybe offering, a list of those questions as you think of them, and maybe then at the end of the week sending them, or sending an email and saying, I know that some of these might take some research, or you might need to get back to me on them, but I jotted these down this week as I saw things that came home. Wonder if you could help me to find some of this information. And again, a timeline really helps for when you expect something to be back, because then that sets that up for the teacher to be able to work on it. Appropriate support when transitioning from place to place. I love that. That's so true. So thinking about conferences, because we most often go to these parent-teacher conferences, but this works for any conference. If it's an ARD meeting, I think the important part is to have what you want to know written down. There will be things that come up in the meeting, but feel free to jot those down and bring something to take notes on, because what happens to me is I will get a little bit flustered in a meeting and think, oh, I really need to come back to that. But if I don't write it down, then it doesn't get asked. And so, having an opportunity to do that. Oh yeah, training. Yes, what training do aides have to appropriately support my son? Great question. And as someone who's done webinars for instructional aides and paraprofessionals for years, that's really critical. And when it comes to, training being lacking, that's also a question that you can pose to, special education coordinator, or, to student services, saying, I'd really like to know what trainings do you have available and what's the expectation for training. Those are questions that are good to ask, and I think are really are critical for you to have. I want to make sure that I'm keeping on track with our time. Is it appropriate to ask if he's getting the services that he's supposed to be getting, speech, and if it doesn't sound like from him that he is? So I think a good question to ask is, can you tell me a little bit about, my son's schedule during the week? When does he receive these services? Or I know that from the IEP that these are the services that he should be receiving. Do you know what days and what times he receives those? If you could print out a schedule for me, that would be great. And then I think taking a look, and what you don't see, then knowing to ask about that. And yes, and probably an email is one way to do it, but I think also saying, with just like a few minutes to ask you a question about, the coordination of, his time with service providers. Is that best something that you and I should talk about, or do I need to contact somebody else just with some questions around that? Because it also may not be the teacher who is able to make headway in that. The buck always doesn't stop with the teacher. And I think sometimes in districts, especially where there are short resources, or people have changed and people have left, or contracts have expired, that they should be in the IEP. If they are not in there, and the schedule is that you get from the teacher isn't looking like the one that you understood from, the ARD meeting, then really, I think making sure that you ask the question and ask about. who that you need to chat with, because it could be something that's happening with personnel in the district and they may be able to explain. But before anything changes, that should be a conversation that happens with you. So this is another just tool in the PowerPoint, is about what do you do before, during, and after. There's a website, a blog, Be Like Bianca, and Bianca is a middle school teacher. She's also a mom, and says these are some things that you can think about as you approach the parent-teacher conference. And really, I always say, be prepared. Just coming with questions, because even if there isn't an agenda, that is already set, these are the things we're going to talk about today. You have some things as a parent that you'd like to know, and it's good to bring those to that time. And then afterward, maybe thinking about what follow-up looks like. So when it comes to maintaining the connection and sustaining that partnership, because you want it to last, I think it's really important to think about the 3 C's and to continue to think about the 3 C's. Like communication. So you're coming to meetings, you're coming to conferences, and whether those are virtual meetings or they're just meetings that that happen, at normal times like conferences, then, do your best to make them. But when you provide context about what those inconvenient times are or about availability, then really working for a solution to make sure that there's still an opportunity to communicate, even if in-person meetings or Zoom meetings are going to be really tough to fit in during schedules that work for both of you, right? Especially if you're working at night and you're sleeping during the day, it's a really hard schedule to maintain. So being up during school hours to meet with the teacher can be really challenging. And those preferred methods, consistency, having a rhythm for checking in. It may not be weekly, but it is important to at least be able to have some sort of rhythm. If it's monthly, if it's every semester, that you're going to have a meeting, even if you don't, if you haven't scheduled anything else, or that once a month you're going to ask for time for a phone call. And some students and some teachers, there may be daily or every other day. It may be more frequent, but it might just be as simple as, today we were able to do these things before she came to school. And so this is what's happening, or changes in medication or updates like that, things that you've observed that need to be shared, and continue to offer collaboration. When there's a challenge, when something arises that is difficult, it's often a difficult situation for teachers as well, because you have the protocols and the things that you usually follow, you have the things that you know to do, and at the same time, not all of those are going to work in every situation. So approaching with in the spirit of, let's work together. This is new. I'm not sure how to navigate it yet, but really appreciate all of your expertise and being open to figuring this out together. I think it's a good way to frame that conversation. So just in the chat, just pick any of the numbers that apply and maybe share those in the chat, things that you've experienced, challenges to communication, because communication, even if you're doing your very best for it to come out well, there can be things that will arise that are challenges. And so being in the frame of mind of understanding that this is not going as I expected, right? Yes, help addressing behavior challenges that arise, okay, when they're provoked by other students. Okay, 1, 3, 5, and 6. Okay, negative responses. Yes. Good. 1 and 6. So when your child is provoked by other students, and I relate to that experience, that to me is one of those things where we need to talk about not just bullying, but stimuli, right? So when you think of an interaction with a particular child as a stimulus, and the response for your child is going to be one of protecting themselves or feeling defensive or being agitated or being escalated, by that interaction. Then again, approaching the conversation with, just saying, I really want to know how to address this. I know that my child is going to be in classrooms and in settings with people that are difficult for them to get along with, or it's really tough for them to have, to navigate this. What are some of the ways that you found that you can de-escalate this? Or what are some of the things that you found make this circumstance better? Is there something that I can do? How can I best prepare him or her for this day when they come to school for being able to handle this, this challenge? Are there things that we can do to support that? Sometimes the solution involves more than just teacher and family or teacher and parent. It might be that we need one of the related service providers to come in and specifically begin working on that challenge, and then also with goals. If it's an instance of bullying, because sometimes students will be bullied by their peers, I think you need to understand, one, what the policies on bullying are and what happens with reporting. Because to me, part of the thing that happens a lot with bullying is it doesn't get the required reporting that happens, because the reporting in many states also holds parents accountable. Because then the conversation isn't just children trying to handle issues with children or youth and the school trying to, their hands are tied. It's, we've actually reported this, it's documented, and now it's something that becomes, we need to have conversations with those other parents as well. So just without, the specific context of that. But thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your questions, and also sharing some of the things that happen. Boy, number 6 really bugs me. That only reaches out when there's an issue. I think that if you're going to communicate with parents about their children, it needs to be about the things that are successes and milestones, or fun things that you've done in the class, things that were exciting. Because I want to know, I love my child. I see them at home. I know their personality. And hearing from you about the things that are really great or that you celebrate, those are really important for me to hear that you see them too. I know we're at time, but I just have a few more things that I want to share. And of course you'll have the PowerPoint as well. But just in terms of navigating these difficult situations, these are really just kind of high level. Make sure that you support your child first. That doesn't mean that your child isn't interpreting something that may be, like you may need to get more clarification around, but really to take care of their immediate needs. Because the worst thing we can do when somebody's injured is say, well, what's probably going to happen because you got injured that way, instead of saying, what can I do to help you right now? Are you okay? We probably need to get that taken care of, right? It's making sure that you're addressing the wound, the response, what's happened in the moment as much as you can. And then some of these are just ideas about navigating these really difficult conversations. Some of them are just interpersonal, like, hey, emphasize that you want to hear concerns. I do, but I also want to talk about other things with my student. You're asking that I go to the principal instead of you. Can you tell me why? Or sure, but I'd like for you to be a part of the meeting. I'm happy to contact them, but I'd really like for you to be there. And some of it is formal. Things where you need to document, or where you need to go to the next person and say, we didn't get this addressed. I need to have some additional support. If a teacher is non-responsive, you can assume that maybe they're busy, or maybe it's not reaching them, but it's really important that you schedule a time to sit down and talk, because maybe you need to do a reset, a level set of the communication. So someone asked about transition, and I think this is really important, the things that we want to talk about at these different stages in terms of transition, that the connection between, what does it look like? What is the readiness that my child has for moving into elementary school? I think it's always good to find out who the next set of people are, to know the right contacts, the right artifacts that you need to be collecting at each stage. And that becomes particularly important middle to high school when we're talking about transition. Knowing who the players are, even knowing who the people are at high school when your student is in middle school. What opportunities will my child have to go over to the high school and see the facilities or see things where they'll get to do training and experience some of that, the technical growth and classes that they'll have. Who's going to be helping them with their transition portfolio at that level, and when will they have first contact with that person to get to meet them? So all of these are really important things. And again, you're asking questions. The teacher may not be the person to tell you about transition at that point, but you could have conversations with the people who are handling that at different levels in the school. Getting to know the right personnel is helpful. So then again, making sure that you have a conference to discuss transition. And it doesn't have to be a conference in middle school or high school. It could be conferences before that. Just want to make sure I'm keeping transition on everyone's plate to think about those things as I look ahead. What questions should I be asking now? What are some things that I can expose them to right now to help at home with them thinking about where they might go next? Are there people in the community? Are there centers or resources that I can be looking into? And always bringing your questions and information that could be helpful. So thinking about today, just to give consideration to what are some of the ways that you might engage differently with your child's teacher. You can share that in the chat as we finish up today. But I just so appreciate being able to share with you, to talk with you today about all of the things related to communication. This is not an exhaustive list of the things that you can do. These are some resources that I used for today, and we'll continue to share others with the network. But I want to say thank you, not just for your time today, but for what you're doing to advocate for your children, because this is really, really tough. Reaching out with positives, not just negatives, when there's an issue. Yes. A teacher told me once that one of the best things that she saved a note that I wrote to her about a book that she shared with my son, and it became his favorite. And I shared with her that was so special, that we read it every night. And she said, that is just a wonderful thing, to see that and to hear that feedback. So thanks to all of you. Thank you, Stephanie, for inviting me again. Really.
Yes, Mary, thank you. Always a wealth of information, and we really appreciate it. We do have one question that I want to share with you in the Q&A.
Sure.
This parent asked, what do you do when the relationship between you and the school district is so strained, and the school is asking that you transfer your child to another district? What are some things that you can do?
Okay. So when something like that happens, I think that the first thing that I consider is you've got to consider your vulnerability and the feelings that you have, because the feelings are there of it's rejection for your child, rejection for you. And it's not always intended that way, but it is something that definitely comes across that way. Right. So thinking about how to prepare yourself for this being an opportunity. What is the opportunity that could arise from going to a different district? Understanding everything about the supports that are available, and don't try to navigate it alone. I think it's important to have parent advocates. I think that it's really critical that you get formal in the way that you need to make sure your rights are being honored, and that your child's rights are being honored, and that every single support that district is saying, you need to go somewhere else, that they are providing all the supports that they are obligated to provide. And that's a conversation that if they don't want to, if the teacher's not going to sit down, and maybe it's not part of the next ARD meeting, it's something that has to happen with a superintendent, someone at that level. You've got to be talking, district conversations. And don't see this as a failure of you or your child. There are a lot of districts that are not providing or not able to provide the resources that they are expected to. And sometimes they make the mistake of being defensive, and it comes across in a way that does hurt parents and students. So you're an advocate. continue to be an advocate and look for an opportunity with this new district. And I think even the initiating conversation early, initiating those contacts, and it's a new partnership. It's not the same partnership, it's a new one. So I wish you, the best in that. And I know it's not easy. I once had a teacher, a principal say, well, maybe this isn't the right school. And the superintendent promptly said, you're not allowed to do that, but gave me a transfer anyway. And I felt terrible. I stewed about it for a long time, but saw it as a blessing later, because he moved into with a classroom and a teacher that was amazing. So I hope it's an opportunity for you.
Thank you, Mary, so much. We're going to wrap up now. Let me share my screen one more time as we're wrapping up. Again, Mary, thank you. It's always such a wealth of information, and we just love when you come and join us. As a reminder, a recording of the webinar will be available on our website at PRntexas.org and also on our Facebook page at PRN Texas. If you're needing a certificate of attendance, you will be receiving an email to thank you for coming to today's webinar. If you'll follow the link in that email, you can get your certificate of attendance. We do have a great lineup of webinars coming up that I want to share with you. So on October 3rd, so that's 1 week away, when students with disabilities are bullied at school, our guest speaker is Colleen Potts with Disability Rights Texas, and she's going to share some fantastic information with you. The following week on October 10th, we've got Nancy DeSterlick-Hannigan from Dyslexia Connects joining us to share about partnering to support struggling writers. And then on October 18th, all of these are at 12:15, we have Relationships, Resolution, and Resources, an introduction to CADRE, which is the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Special Education. And then on November 7th, we've got FBAs and BIPs that actually work with Dr. Stephanie Hart from West Texas A&M University. So great webinars coming up. Be sure and register and make plans to attend. On the screen right now is contact information for our Director of Statewide Services, Christina, our support specialist, Chelsea, and myself. Please check out our website, again, at prntexas.org for information on upcoming webinars and events in your local regions, as well as lots of information for you as parents. You can also like and follow us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at PRNTexas. Thank you again for joining us. And Mary, it is always such a pleasure to have you join us and to hear from you and to learn from you. So thank you again for taking time to join us.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.